Welcome to Making an Impact. I'm Katie Mills, head of Zeigo Power at Schneider Electric. And in this podcast, we meet incredible individuals from a range of industries to discuss the exciting projects they're involved with today, their career journey today, and ultimately what impact their work is having on the world. In this episode, we are making an impact with Shaunna Berensden, Chief Innovation Officer at Anglian Water, who is passionate about driving positive impact and transformation in the water industry. We'll discuss the interconnected challenges of innovation and diversity in the water industry and how, through teamwork and collaboration with wider organisations, we can safeguard resources for the future. Welcome, Shaunna, to Making an Impact.
Lovely to be here.
So, Shaunna, water. Tell me what is exciting right now about the water industry.
So much. And I'm really, really glad to be here to be able to have the opportunity to talk about it because, naturally my role as innovation officer, I am privy to lots of the stuff, but I don't think necessarily that that's the perception that the water sector has. So aside from the proposed £104 billion investment from Ofwat in the next 5 years, if we consider technology in the round, so Ofwat at the start of AMP7 launched an innovation fund, and one of the first funded projects from that was a project called Safe Smart Systems. And that was an Anglian-led project aiming to effectively create an autonomous water system. So AI meets water, a human-led digital future, basically, for want of a better term. And what really surprised me about that project was the amount of people that got involved. So the levels of partnership and the level of collaboration with that project. So really transformational stuff. Then if we consider sustainability and circularity as a theme, continuing with what was funded through the Ofwat Innovation Fund, a second project, which was called Triple Carbon Reduction. So that aimed to evidence a step change in both process emissions and electricity used in the water treatment process. So this is now the waste/recycling side. But at the same time, creating a green hydrogen that we can either use to in our own fleet or sell on and continue that level of circularity. And lastly, if we consider sustainability and circularity again, what might surprise you as not necessarily something associated with the water sector is a project called Project Firefly. And that is a collaboration between Anglian Water and Green Fuels. And that uses post-anaerobic digested biosolids and converts them into sustainable aviation fuel. So if rolled out nationally, we have the potential to eliminate 57 million tonnes of sewage sludge and convert them into 250,000 tonnes of sustainable aviation fuel. And these might seem like quite unusual projects to highlight, but I think ultimately, if the water sector can help contribute towards filling up someone's hydrogen car or making them feel less guilty about air travel, or in another project using closed-loop heat pumps to create 12% of the UK's tomatoes and peppers, the narrative will start to change about the water sector and people will place a higher importance and a higher value on the service that we provide.
Also, I had no idea that there was those kind of projects that were going on.
Yeah.
Nice to know that kind of sewage to power my plane in the future. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned value.
Yeah.
Water, we all expect to turn the tap on every day and it just come out, right?
Yeah.
How do you make people care about a commodity that is just expected to be there no matter what today and also for the future?
Yeah. And it's certainly tough, and we're trying to surround ourselves with the behavioural scientists that apply nudge theory and things like that. And what we know is that other countries and other societies are better at placing a higher value on water. And I don't think we're going to get there necessarily by butting heads with the media. I think we need to work alongside the media to get rid of those sensationalist headlines. But we also know the further you are away from a process and the less understanding that you have, the less value you apply to it. So as many as 80% of our customers don't think about where their water comes from when it comes out of the tap. And they often get things like how much they use incorrect by as much as 50%. So I mean, how much water do you use in your home?
Yeah, I could have told you in my old home, but not in my current home. But roughly, I probably pay about £50 a month towards my water.
Yeah, I mean, you probably wouldn't be far off, but many people get that wrong. So at the moment, the bills are £1.45 a day for both water and wastewater services. People tend to estimate that they use 100 litres of water a day, but it's actually more like 150. And so we can educate customers. Every opportunity we can to communicate with them, we try and educate them on things like usage and not value necessarily, but usage and how they can reduce their usage in their home. And it does feel counterintuitive that someone that's providing you a service wants you to use less.
No, and I'm a Thames Water customer. I live in London, and I get the emails through where it shows me kind of how much water I've used that month and what that equates to. And I think visualizing it and making people, like, giving people the ability to see it physically makes a big difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's like in a lot of things. If it's something that you can't physically see, it becomes a lot harder for people to value it. So I think giving people the ability to see, like you say, like, this is how much you're using and this what this equates to, is really, really important to help drive that awareness.
I totally agree. And I think there's the opportunity to ride on some coattails as well. So, for example, in the last few months, the UK launched its first floating sauna, and it's in the Liverpool docks. It's not even in our region. But we, as a sector, we might start tapping into people that are going to suddenly look at the water quality of Liverpool docks post-steam and plunging into them. So it's about trying to capture pockets of audience and not just rely on the communication we have through our bill. That is too late, I often think.
No, 100%. And I remember when we spoke last time, you said to me, it's not just about what comes out of the tap, it's about what you put down the plug.
Exactly.
Right? That's just as important.
Yeah. And I mean, society are becoming more in tune with that, if not for the water systems and the water system process and treatment, but for your own human health. You know, we're learning things like using natural products is much better than using chemical products and things like that. So I think society is getting there. It's getting there slowly, and we're trying to nudge it along the way, but it's getting there.
So when we think about innovation projects, the ones that you just mentioned to us, why are they important? What challenges are we facing with the water sector in the future that means innovation is so important today?
Yeah, I mean, plentiful. We know in at least a climate change context, what we're going to experience tomorrow is not what we're seeing today. We have a water resources management plan, and that covers us from the year 2025 to 2050. And we know that we're going to be having 38% less water available to us, but at the same time be expected to serve 900,000 extra customers. So there is a huge deficit in the water availability in our future. And so we have to innovate to get there and to be able to meet that demand of our customers.
And when you talk about, that deficit, that gap, what is some of the technology that we're seeing or that's being used already really in the water sector that in the future can maybe help, overcome that gap between demand and actually what's available?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, we think as a company, and I'm sure all the other water companies believe that to be true as well, is that we're a digital technology and systems thinking company. So we like to try and be predictive instead of reactive. So that always has the opportunity of saving water. We don't wait for something to go wrong. We use modeling, we use various digital twins, we use scenario planning so that we can monitor our systems on a whole. So it's really important for us to be able to predict things. I think we're using behavioral science to nudge customers along the way to help us meet that deficit gap as well. But we're also investing in billion-pound projects like the Strategic Pipeline Alliance, which brings water from the top of our region, which has a little bit more, to the very bottom of our region, which has much, much less. So a multitude of projects and technologies and supply chain help us with that target.
Okay. When we think about, so we've said, people take it for granted, right? That water comes in, it's always there.
Yeah.
Obviously, when it doesn't come and there's a problem, people will be that they're very quick to criticize.
Yeah.
How, as an industry, I suppose, do you deal with that? How do you fix these problems in a way that keeps the customer happy? Or can you, I suppose, sometimes, because you're never going to keep everyone happy?
I don't know, I think an engaged customer is by default more naturally a happy customer. So that applies to even when things go wrong. But if I can give you a slight politician's answer as my first part, the proportion of times that things go wrong are dramatically reducing. You know, if you consider interruptions to supply, for example, you're 5 times less likely to experience an interruption to supply than you were in 1990. So we are improving, and we're improving at dramatic rates. When things do go wrong, at least in an Anglian context, it is very much an all hands on deck work towards a solution. So I jump on customer calls. I've done countless over the years. And that's how I personally know that an informed customer is a happy one. So when things do go wrong, we try to be accurate, we try to be timely, and we try to be realistic about the expectations of both improvement, but also fixing the problem.
Yeah. Okay, great. And so we've spoken about innovation. You're in charge of innovation. Forget about water for now, just the larger corporate business world. How do you do innovation in a large corporate from your experience?
It's hard. It's hard. And I don't manage innovation. You know, Anglian Water has a couple of core values, and one of them is always exploring. So I manage the team that help the business to innovate. We are all innovators. But I guess, you know, as children, we'd rather play with the box than play with the contents. And I think our rather formal education system almost prevents us from keeping that philosophy, and it teaches us to retain information rather than to interpret and question it. So I need a team that are going to interpret and question both processes and people. We know that, you know, there are specialists in the organisation that have a fixed way of doing things because we're looking after a precious commodity like water. And our job as an innovation team is to not necessarily poke holes in the way that they're doing things, but allow them to sit in the uncomfortability that might not be the best way to do things going forward, and ask the right questions. And my team need to be really anti-fragile, and I've been learning a lot about this recently, and you know how it's different to resiliency. But anti-fragile people, they when they get knocked, they get stronger, whereas resiliency, it brushes over them and they stay the same. So I need a team that's anti-fragile. I need a team that build each other up, because innovation projects at best can run like clockwork, and at worst can feel like a marble run. So I do need a team that are anti-fragile. So as long as we can sit in that zone of discomfort, we're doing good for the business.
Yeah. And how do you push people to sit in that discomfort, right? I see it. I'm in a big organization. People have done things the way they've done them for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And then you say, right, let's maybe change it up a little bit. And that discomfort is difficult for a lot of people. How do you help as an innovation team people be okay with that? Or maybe you can't, but hopefully you can help them feel a bit more comfortable with discomfort, shall we say?
I think it's often linking it back to a major concern. So, you know, the climate change context. We know we can't be the same tomorrow as we were today, and we need to push forward in that manner and in that way. And so if we can demonstrate how a process will save carbon, save energy, save effort, save time, you know, we need to find the right carrot for that person sitting in that room who we're trying to welcome into that zone of discomfort.
Yeah.
So it's often asking, you know, why not? You know, it's not a great question, and it often strips back their layers of process and their layers of comfortability, but why not is a good start.
I was once told by one of our very senior leaders in Schneider that if I have to ask why 3 times and someone can't answer me, then they don't know.
Yeah.
And that was something that really sat with me. And I was like, yeah, actually, if you have to ask why 3 times and you still don't get the answer, they probably can change the way they do things, because they probably don't know why they're doing it that way anymore. It kind of so much time has passed. And ultimately, innovation is problem solving, right? It's about looking at the problems that we face every day in an organization or in the world, and it's about coming up with solutions to those problems.
Yeah.
As a leader, how do you build a team that is constantly problem solving, is anti-fragile, as you say, and is, I do want to say resilient too. Like there is an element of kind of anti-fragile and resiliency, right? How do you build that team as a leader?
You have to dedicate a lot of time to making sure the team is high performing, and a lot of that starts with diversity and making sure you have diversity of thought within your team, but not just diversity and diversity of thought, because we know that a non-diverse team will outperform a diverse team if no time has been given to articulating what is different about the team, what people's strengths, weaknesses, what ticks them, what drives them. So for me, it's about creating a diverse team at the very start and building them up in that way.
And understanding, I suppose, the different characters that you have in the room, right? Like, one thing I've learned as a leader over my career is that I have to learn how to relate to my team, right? Because high performers are naturally harder to manage because they are high performers. So you have to make sure that you can relate to them in the right way and you're communicating as a team in the right way.
Yeah.
What kind of things do you do to support the team in that way?
Yeah, I mean, we explore a lot of communication tools and behavior insights, and naturally we've done the insights program and we know people's colors, but we're looking at cognitive diversity as well, and as an added layer. So we do the game changing index, which is a tool that says what your propensity for change and innovation is.
Yeah.
But we've also co-developed another index called the Explorers Index, which explores the environment in which you're innovating. So it's all well and good being a game changer if you're not in an environment that helps support that personality type. So we layer a lot of these things on top of one another to find the perfect role for that individual at that moment in their life.
Okay, awesome. And so when you say about creating the perfect environment, well, not perfect environment, but the right environment for someone to disrupt, I suppose.
Yeah.
How have you done that within a larger organization and an older organization, right? Anglian Water, an older organization, I'm sure has its processes that it's done for many, many years, as we do at Schneider. How do you help create that right environment for those different thinkers to thrive?
It's for me, it's all about making sure that what they need, they have access to within our team. So making sure they have access to the people that will help them along that process. The processes themselves they can follow from our team, and the platforms. So making sure there's geographically there's a space that they can test their innovations, which was fundamental to our whole shop window program, about making sure that technology is not tested in isolation and technologies themselves are tested against one another.
Yeah.
So, I mean, making sure people feel supported. Predominantly, our team are the disruptors, but of course there are disruptors across the business as well. And they come to us and we go to them to help that mutual support and that mutual thinking.
Yeah, awesome. So we spoke about diversity in your team and why it's important and why it's needed. What does diversity look like in the rest of Anglian Water?
Yeah, I mean, diversity is personally important to me, but it's also personally important to Anglian Water, and it's important for every team. Yes, the water sector is massively underrepresented when it comes to women and people of colour, but I think at the same time, we know it to be true that there is an increasing societal vulnerability amongst boys and men, and particularly boys and men that are perhaps isolated and site-based and rural. So I think we can hold two things to be true in that context, and effectively look after everyone and play to everyone's strengths. So, welcoming the disruptors, maybe they're the ones with the green skills and the digital skills, but at the same time safeguarding those that have a longer lengths of service and have a particular way of working. So, I mean, from an Anglian perspective, a fifth of our employees are aged 56 and over. And the average length of service with those individuals is 17 years. And if you add those two stats together, that equates to 17,000 years of service. So it's a lot of service to try and safeguard. And, that's a pocket of the organisation that we're particularly focused on at the moment, because, we are facing a retirement cliff edge, not just with, like I said, numbers retiring, but their lengths of service and their collective hours. So we're trying to team up individuals to work together that wouldn't necessarily have worked together. So doing job swaps and job shares. We're extending opportunities for notice periods. So if you give a longer notice period, you get an extra week and a half, 2 weeks of annual leave. So it's the opportunity to try and safeguard their legacy as well.
Yeah. And I suppose that knowledge transfer is a really important piece, right? We have similar challenges at Schneider. And I know we have been doing kind of a buddy system, right? Where those that are nearing retirement age are buddied up with younger people coming through the business, whether that's grads that have just started on our grad schemes, all those different kind of areas. And that's actually worked really well. I have a buddy actually who has been in the business for about 30 years, and the wealth of knowledge that he has, but he's desperate to learn from me the digital side of things, and he wants to understand that world a bit more. So it's actually a really great, we kind of regularly catch up and have a chat, and I always kind of go to him and say, what do you think about this? And he'll say, well, we used to do it that way, don't think we should do it again, maybe think about this. And he's really great to kind of challenge the thinking, but it's allowing that knowledge transfer to happen, which I think is really important.
Really important.
Meet Zeigo Activate, your carbon reduction solution. From tracking to emission reduction, Zeigo Activate provides valuable insights and connects you with a network of energy solution providers to turn your ambitions into action. Wherever you are on your decarbonisation journey, our easy-to-use software gives you the customised roadmap and connections you need to reach your sustainability targets. Search Zeigo Activate and request your free demo today. So then you as an individual and as a leader, how do you see yourself as a leader? What type of leader are you?
Yeah.
So this is always an awkward question, right? Because you're like, oh, I don't want to say what type of leader I am, because maybe I'm not, but this is what I think.
And it feels a bit, look at me, pat, pat. But and I'm sure my team would have a very different answer. But, I don't have necessarily a technical background. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a chartered environmentalist. So I hire the experts around me. And so I'm not going to hire them and then tell them what to do. So I very much hope and expect my team inform and steer me, and I'm there to serve them. I also think that I am quite good at modelling vulnerability. I've been quite open with my team about loss and fertility issues, and I certainly have not necessarily had exposure to with my leaders. And so I'm not saying that my team have to step into that space, but it's my job as a leader to create that space, regardless of whether they want to step into it or not. And I think lastly, when I started to get into leadership positions and felt slightly vulnerable and exposed, and the nagging doubts were in my brain, I think I prioritized the trait of loyalty quite highly, or probably too highly than I should have.
Yeah.
I wanted my team to be loyal to me, and I wanted to model loyalty to those that I was working with and for. And I think as I've got older, and I've been exposed to different parts of the organisation and different teams, I think integrity to me is really important, and way more important than loyalty. I'm not saying that I'm necessarily completely direct or blunt, but people know where they stand with me, and I like to know where I stand with people, and I don't want to have to tell my team, tell me how it is, because they should just default to telling me how it is. I don't want to have to uncover the dirty secrets that might be weighing really heavily on them. A problem shared is a problem halved, and I think that's the kind of leader I am.
I think it's all of those traits that you just mentioned are so crucial for any leader, right? Vulnerability, absolutely. I was very similar. Came back from maternity leave. I had quite severe postpartum depression. Never suffered with mental health issues, and I was very honest with my team from day one when I came back. And I came back from maternity leave to a brand new team that didn't know me.
That's hard.
So it was very much I was really open and honest from day one, and said, look, this is me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm okay now, but I have had struggles, and I know quite a few of them said we actually really appreciated that, right? Because we've all had our own struggles, and it's nice to know that you will probably get it if it happens again to us. So I am kind of totally with you on the vulnerability side. I think it's really, really important to model it and give space for it, right? Is the point.
Yeah. I mean, I do think having a new team is both a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
Because it feels intimidating. But it's also an opportunity to go further into your authentic self as a leader. You've gained the confidence in the team before, and therefore you can start to expose yourself a little bit more and test the waters, and put on those different hats. So yeah, I can imagine that being really tough,
Yeah.
but also an opportunity.
It was great, and I had quite a lot of I went on a really kind of intense leadership training last year, actually, out to Boston. And one of the things I realized as a leader that I needed to get better at was, because I've traditionally been in innovation and tech, I've always been a problem solver, right? I want to solve the problem. But actually, as I've become more senior throughout my career, and now as I lead, I'm not the one that should be solving the problem. I should be helping to define it, but it's my team that should be solving it. And I think I was too quick sometimes to jump in and want to solve it for them.
Yeah.
And not giving them the space to do it and figure it out themselves. So that's been as an innovator, it's really hard to not want to jump in and fix everything all the time or solve the problem. But definitely as a leader, something that I've had to get much better at and learn, especially with a new team, right? Giving them the space to solve it and not be that I'm going to come in and fix everything, because that's definitely not the case.
No, I'm exactly the same. So last year I became an accredited coach. And the thing that kept tripping me up was the reverting to trying to problem solve rather than, sitting in that discomfort. So in doing that process, I think I became a better leader for my team.
Yeah, amazing. So, Chief Innovation Officer, how did you get to this point, right? You've already said that, not many women in the water sector. You are a relatively a senior woman in the water sector. How did you get to this point? What is your background?
Yeah, and my path to this role definitely hasn't been linear, but I'm not sure many people.
I don't think it ever is it?
Never is. It's always interesting.
Yeah.
So I studied psychology at university, initially thinking that I wanted to get into the field of research in dementia. But then I quickly realized that was weighing very heavily on me, and I didn't think that I could do it as a career opportunity. But at the same time, I worked for a different university in their intellectual property and commercialization department. And that got me really interested in seeing how seedlings of ideas get, exposed to the big corporate world and either chewed up and spit out, or, they become unicorns. And so that really planted an idea in my head of I wanted to see that change. And so when I graduated, I joined an investment house which specialized in water investments and infrastructure, and I did that for a few years, and then I became a consultant for a water and technology consulting company, of which Anglian were one of my clients. So what my role was there was to effectively help technology and supply chain match better with market and utility needs. And so when Anglian advertised the role of head of innovation engagement, which I hadn't seen across the sector anywhere before, I jumped at the chance to work in that role, because I think you have to have a nod to the fact that innovation doesn't happen by itself. You need to engage people, be that customers, supply chain, employees, in the act of innovation. You have to be there to support them.
Yep.
So I found that a really interesting role to do. Whilst I was doing that role, I was offered the opportunity to do a year-long secondment to help establish Spring, which is the UK Water Centre for Excellence. And so I did that for a year with the now MD, Carly Perry, went off and had my son, and then came back as the Chief Innovation Officer at Anglian Water. I've also been on the board of WaterStart for the best part of 2 years now, which aims to look at de-risking innovation globally.
Mm-hmm.
So that's me.
Amazing. Awesome. As you said, not linear at all, but loads of different types of experience that you can then bring into that innovation role, right? Which is what's mostly needed when it comes to innovation.
Yeah.
So great. Anyone wanting to join the water sector
of
the future, let's say, what would you say to them? What is great about the water sector and the challenges that you face ultimately?
Yeah. Firstly, do it. There are so few jobs that are related to the survival of mankind. And, it might seem like a really outlandish statement, but fundamentally that is what the water sector provides. It provides a life-giving source. It is a finite source. So, it's the opportunity to safeguard something for future generations. So I think there's an innate sense of pride for those working in and with the water sector that is, definitely chipped away at, by all of those conversations you have with your friends and your family in the pub, you know, making fun of you for working for the water sector, and it definitely gets to you. But, you know, as a result, it's a really tight-knit community. So, you know, join the water sector, find your network. It's not without its powerhouses when it comes to talent. And it's a really welcoming, open and innovative place.
I love that. So get involved, basically.
Get involved.
Do you want to help change the world for the better? Get involved in the water sector.
Exactly.
I love it. So finally, to end us, and it's the question that I ask everyone at the end of these podcasts, is what legacy do you want to leave behind when you're long gone years from now and your grandchildren turn around and say, do you know what, my grandma, what's that legacy that you want to leave behind?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the legacy that the water sector has at the moment is not the right one, and it's not the one that we should strive towards either. I think, you know, the water sector last year lost a great icon in Tony Harrington. He was the Director of Environment for Welsh Water, and he was a massive advocate for bringing people together and realising that the safeguarding of something so precious as water is not just the water sector's issue or problem or responsibility. It's a whole collective number of people's responsibility to safeguard that finite resource. So anything that we can do or I can do to help personally change that narrative will be a really great legacy for me. I want there to be a high amount of value placed on water. I want there to be a greater understanding between those customers that we serve as Anglian, but society as a general, about the water treatment process, the wastewater treatment process, everything to do with the water sector and the water cycle. But I mean, you know, you heard about all of the great stuff that my team are working on in the meantime. So creating autonomous systems and creating hydrogen and helping to heat the UK's greenhouses to provide, you know, tomatoes and peppers. So I think even if we manage to land some of those projects, I think that's a good enough legacy for me.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, Shaunna, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.